let the trash talk begin between a certain McGregor and a certain Diaz. Well, there's only one McGregor, but a certain Diaz. That would be Nate Diaz. UFC 202, the rematch between McGregor and Diaz, the aftermath of the before and after of a fake retirement backfiring to put in more time, maybe longer for him to prepare.
Carry the two.
Multiply by 4, and you get
UFC
a rematch.
202.
202, a rematch.
Yes, you're right.
Here are the words from Conor McGregor himself. Quote, "I'm feeling very confident in myself that I'll go in and I'll toy with this man," said McGregor, per David O'Gorman of MMAfighting.com. 8 minutes of the fight, I was toying with him. That fadeaway left hand that he caught me with, my senses were still there. It was almost like a fatigue thing that my balance was gone. McGregor continued to tell reporters in terms of the rematch, in terms of his system, his training system, and is it broken? Is it okay? Is it preparing him enough to fight and win against Nate Diaz? I didn't actually bring in any southpaws, not one. I didn't spar with any southpaws because the reason we don't really care what the opponent is doing is because they always pull out every damn time. But this time I know Nate is going to show up. Now I've brought in a tall, lanky southpaws with a solid lead hand, guys with solid jiu-jitsu credentials, and John Kavanagh is overlooking every session, managing every session. So it seems like he's taking a smarter route. Bringing in a stylistic fighter that is similar to Nate Diaz would be a great way to train for Nate Diaz. Now, the one thing that I want to point out, at least with the Diaz brothers real quick, is he says, but this time I know Nate is going to show up. They've actually never not shown up. They're two of the only fighters, not only fighters, but they're two of very few fighters who have never pulled out of a fight because of injury, which I find. And McGregor's another one of those guys. He always shows up.
Yeah. Those two guys would come in with a broken back. They would never turn away from a fight. I've got a couple of thoughts on this really quick. Great, Conor McGregor's trash talking. Great that he's getting everyone already more excited for the fight that we've all been waiting to see. Next point is I don't think he has to. I don't think that he has to be showcasing certain training methods. I don't think he has to be showcasing the fact that he lost the fight. And it seems that there's excuses. I don't really care if I piss off McGregor fanboys at this point because I've pissed off enough Diaz fanboys. But I'm just going to be honest. I don't think McGregor has a leg to stand on when it comes to making those arguments. Like, he was outfought by Nate Diaz. He was underprepared, according to him. And you could tell that fatigue, he was maybe hitting a little too many biceps, not enough treadmill. And it shows through his training that he's adjusting now, but I would have preferred him to just show it in the octagon. I don't think that it does anything other than, I would say, reinstate the fact that maybe he hasn't learned his lesson from the last fight, because there was a lot of trash talking going into the last fight, and he was knocked down a few pegs, to be said. But the other side of it is I think that it's an interesting point, and I agree with them. The guy has to adjust his training methods quite a lot, and I made this point a few videos back when we talked about McGregor, when I was defending McGregor a little bit. This is before the whole retirement thing. When I was defending him, because a lot of people were saying, he's finally taught his lesson, all that trash talking, he doesn't uphold it. When I was giving him credit for the fact that he doesn't pull out of fights and that he has to adjust to different fighters and sometimes 2-3 weeks notice. And people were arguing, saying, oh, well, other people should be credited for taking the fight in short notice. Yeah, but he's been training for months. For Aldo in the first instance, trained for months to fight a guy that had remarkable striking, one of the most dangerous men in the octagon, to have to switch 2 weeks before and fight a man who's a ridiculous wrestler.
Right,
who
Chad
can take
Mendes,
him down.
One of his biggest weaknesses, yeah.
And McGregor, I give him so much credit for that fight because he was taken down quite a lot, and he had to work on his groundwork to make sure that he wasn't submitted or that he wasn't forced into a further adverse situation. And McGregor proved that he was a real deal in that fight. And the same thing happens again with Dos Anjos. He's preparing to fight someone who, again, remarkable striker, great striking distance as well, great on the ground. Just an overall, I would say, ridiculous fighter to face, to come up against a warrior that is Nate Diaz, who will take punches after punches and not be moved by it. Bigger, lankier. And he had to adjust to that, and he just didn't adjust as well as he could have. But that's not an excuse, I think, to make this fight, or that last fight, to discredit in any way. I think that Nate Diaz took the fight in just a short notice and didn't even have a full camp. So there's two sides of the coin now. Nate Diaz is going to come in even more prepared than what he has done before, and McGregor's going to be prepared. But I just want all the talking to be done in the octagon.
Yeah, knowing these two, there's going to be talking.
Oh,
and I think we should be excited for the talking, right? I mean, there's no reason not to do it. They're both great at talking trash. They're great promoters of themselves. There's a reason both these guys have a rabid fan base, and UFC 202 is going to bring in a lot of money. Fortunately, UFC 200 is before that, and it actually has implications for McGregor versus Diaz because of whatever happens with Edgar versus Aldo. Both those guys want McGregor again. More than anything else, more than they want each other, they want to rampage right through each other so they can get to a fight with McGregor at their weight class. Because if McGregor wins UFC 202 against Diaz, whether by submission, knockout, unanimous decision, split decision, regardless of the outcome, does he stay in that weight class and take on more competitors? And if he loses, then he has no choice but to drop down to the weight class that he was most dominant in, which is the featherweight division, and take on another Aldo or another Edgar. Because you can't stick up, if you can't beat Nate Diaz, you're not going to stick around that weight class and contend or work yourself back up to contend for a title when, granted, even though Dana White would probably give him a shot, when you can go and defend a title in your weight class that you were stronger in.
Yeah, there is numerous outcomes that Conor McGregor is the only person that will decide Conor McGregor's fate.
Yeah, it's all in his hands for
and
sure.
I feel if he wins, this is my thoughts, if he wins against Nate Diaz, he's going to fight Dos Anjos at some point to kind of prove that he's dominant in that division. I think he had to beat a couple of people in the previous division to showcase that he was dominant. You beat Chad Mendes, and then you move up. People always pose that question.
You knocked that Aldo in fucking 10
yeah,
seconds.
That's what I'm saying. They always pose if he didn't fight Aldo, they pose the question, well, was he really proving himself in that division? But then he knocked out Aldo, and then he moved up because he took care of business at that point. And people wanted an Aldo rematch. McGregor owed it to no one to take that rematch. He waited, he adjusted for the first fight, and then took care of business, and he had every right to move up. I worry that his ambition may get the better of him again if he wins against Nate Diaz, because he's joked about Robbie Lawler, and he's joked about going further up the weight class. Now that all plays into what makes Conor McGregor such an interesting ambassador to the sport, because he's going to push boundaries. No other fighter will do what Conor McGregor will do if he wins. He wants to put his name down in the history books, not by being the most consistent fighter in each division and winning numerous belts at different weight classes, but he wants to be the guy that says yes to everything, says no to what previous people have done, and goes on to leave his name in the history books.
Yeah, that's agreed. We'll see what happens. UFC 202 is going to have a lot of implications for the UFC as a whole, so it'll be very interesting to see how that one breaks down. Comment below with what you think about Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz at UFC 202 and the outcome of Edgar versus Aldo affecting the outcome of UFC 202's main event. At Francis_Maxwell on Twitter, at JasonRubin91, at TYT Sports. The tweet game was on fire this weekend.
Dan Keston, or EP, still coming in hot with the memes and tweets.
See you next time.